What did your crush do that completely ruined your infatuation for them? I had a friend who said her boyfriend was arrested for abuse material. The thing was, she knew he was under investigation by the feds because they raided his place and took his computers and hers. As she was living with him, she got hers back. And she had believed him when he said it wasn't true, then was shocked when he was arrested a couple weeks later, not sure why they didn't arrest him during the raid. This friend was pretty bright, and I'd thought she had good common sense. He either pleaded or was convicted. All I know is he went to prison. A friend of mine my entire life, 46 years, just got 12 years jail for sharing and creating abuse material. We grew up together, went to school together, got married around the same time, had kids around the same time, went on holidays together, etc., etc. We were supposed to grow old together. Plans have changed. I had an ex that was full of green flags at the beginning of the relationship, before getting abused, and I never listened to anything that suggested that I needed to get out. So after that, I listened this time, and I went to look him up on the free database. I was simply having gut feelings that something wasn't right. I had been feeling giddy all morning, but I got this feeling that I just needed to look him up, because something wasn't right. I would have looked him up on normal background check databases, but I didn't want to pay the fee that most of the databases charged right away. However, my state's S3X offender registry is available for free for lookup. So I figured I would look there first, and then pay for the criminal databases if nothing showed up there. Something showed up. I can't explain why I got that feeling. I wish I could, but I just couldn't. I was dating this guy for a while after I turned 18. I knew him for a while, but we started dating, and somehow forgot he was on parole. Finally asked, and found out it was that, and met his parole officer. After that, his abusive side came out, and I was scared to leave. Tried to break up with him multiple times, which resulted in him breaking into my house, stalking me, and harassing me. Found out after he dated 2 minors, and tried to report, but no one believed me because the girls didn't want to come forward. Especially when you realize just how many of their friends and family enable it. After breaking up with him, and everything came out, his friends and family welcomed him back with open arms. A lot of people were like, "Oh, that's terrible," and nothing changed. Turns out he had a whole history also, but they failed to mention any of it while we were together. Then acted like I should have known after I kicked him out. I was falsely accused and arrested. My life is ruined, and not one person on this planet gives a shit. Zero evidence, couldn't even place me at the crime scene. The accuser just bailed on the court date. The bigger insult is that people that know me personally refuse to believe that it has much of an impact on my life because the case was thrown out. This comment and many of the other ones on here prove that hilariously false. I appreciate the reminder. My partner was also falsely accused of molesting his children by their mother. The case was dismissed 3 times. He never even went in temporary detention because it is that obvious that he never did it. But here, we are, it stained him emotionally, because even if the molesting case was dismissed, there are still cases ongoing for custody, and he hasn't seen his children in months, not had them in years socially, because she accused him of beating her also, and their social circles got torn apart, and financially, with all the time off to attend court, paying a lawyer, etc. I'm sorry that happened to you. But I also want to point out that if the op had that gut feeling, and that this guy was listed as a S3X offender, it is also totally legit to cut the relationship short. As a survivor of SA as a child, I think that any person that has actually touched a child should die by 1,000 cuts. I went on an amazing date, then did a mugshots.com lookup. It turned out my Yale graduate was actually an accused child molester with a history of financial fraud, and he cleaned Yale as a janitor for work release. Another decent date I went on was with one of Virginia's dumbest criminals. Apparently he for drunk swallowed a bag of weed, caught a DUI, and was kicked out of law school. Happened to me too. He got into meth, but I was trying to help him stay clean. Then one night on a binge, he told me he and his sister had done sexual stuff together as kids, and that he thinks he still has some attraction to younger people. Literally found his laptop full of child porn, and he had molested his former stepdaughter's sister to his sons. Her mom and I were friends, and she divorced him for reasons that were hers, which is why I didn't have an issues dating him. As messed up as it sounds, I stayed with someone after I found he was charged with child molestation. Before you get mad, hear me out. I had actually babysat kid one night a couple years before we dated. So we were dating a couple months when I noticed not only did his kid never came over, but we were always together, and he never left to go visit his kid. So one day, I asked where was his kid. I am not a big fan of deadbeat dads, so I was curious why he wasn't seeing his son. So he explained he was accused of molesting his kid. He said he didn't do it, so I told him to bring over all the court records and leave so I had time to get to the bottom of this and think. It wasn't so much I believed him, but I did believe one of the victims who told me it was all a lie. So what happened was the mom was getting high on heroin. He spent a year trying to get custody of his son from her, but social services aren't ever on the dad's side unless he has money. So they kept blowing him off. It took her brother going to social services and ratting her out for them to finally step in. The kid was 3 and was able to tell them the step-by-step process of cooking heroin before they finally gave him custody of his kid. She decided to make up a story of him molesting his son so her aunts could get custody, who were also drug addicts, but since they doctor hopped and were prescribed opioids instead, they were technically legal drug addicts. So she made up the charge. Unfortunately, the day she said he was molesting his son, his sister was in the house that day and said bone of that happened. Instead of listening to the sister, social services just decided she was molested too. It was actually his sister that I listened to and believed that none of it happened. She was so mad about the whole thing. She was mad no one would listen to her. I understood her anger because my mom accused my dad of molesting me when he had not done anything. The most invasive thing that happened to me was my mom dragging me to a gynecologist as a kid to have me checked to see if my dad had molested me. No one bothered to ask me first. Not surprisingly, my parents were getting a divorce and it was over custody. Are you starting to see a common thread? No one listens to women. We aren't listened to when we report abuse. And we aren't listened to when we say abuse didn't happen, so I believed his sister. I recognized the frustration and anger I felt when something similar happened to me. Unfortunately, both the parents died a year apart. The mom died from a drug overdose, and the dad died from cancer. Because especially in Florida people hunt them at night. It's super faffed up literal movie, shit, but it's a thing. Driving around looking for tents, fires, lights, and start asking if you're homeless and if anyone knows where you are or if you got family, and that shit. It is absolutely terrifying and had gotten to the point there are literal groups of people meeting up to do this, and nothing is being done. Florida is the only place I've actually seen it. I've heard it was happening in a lot of southern states though. I don't think it hits the same level though, as Florida has ridiculously high levels of homeless. But yeah, it baffles me that the US is just allowing this. There's one article about a real estate agent who got caught, and a YouTube video about skinheads hunting homeless. I don't know how accurate the YouTube vid is, didn't watch it. But a dude literally got arrested for it, and I guess they just assumed he was at it alone. Personally, almost 100% that was one of the main guys to pay to get a hunt in. He set up an empty house for the homeless guy for the night, then whoever paid would go in and kill them, then they got a whole empty house that can easily be cleaned. We had been going out for a few weeks, and on the way home from a party, we went to get McDonald's and he paid for me. I have an allergy, and they got my order wrong. I asked, and it wasn't a problem. They made me a new burger and told me to keep the incorrect one as they couldn't resell it. I offered it to him, he didn't want it, so I said I would just bring it home to give to my housemate so it wouldn't go to waste. He was completely fine with this. Then a homeless guy came in and started asking at the tables for change. I offered him the burger and he took it. My date went crazy at me for giving away the burger that he had paid for, even though he was okay with me giving it to my housemate, and followed the homeless men shouting at him to give it back. Then got the guy kicked out of the restaurant. It was terrifying. He went from easygoing and charming to furious in a split second. Then when he sat down again, he acted like everything was normal and asked me if I wanted to go home with him. It was a side of him I hadn't seen before. I'm glad he showed his true colors early. This is a split. Indicative of bipolar, borderline personality disorder, abuse, neglect, abandonment, maybe some other keywords. These people are people too. And if you don't want to take the time to understand them, what triggers them, and why they will continue to be alone and in pain in a world that doesn't care to understand them. Ironically, like the homeless man, I'll explain the situation from his point of view as best as I can guess. I bought my girlfriend something and made sure it wasn't going to kill her or faff her up. They got it wrong, which lit my fuse. Then we got it for free, so I said, "Faff it, I'll give it to housemates, and that's a cool solution." Then she took it and gave it away to some random person I don't respect, or simply didn't want to give them my free burger or solution to the allergy fiasco. Then all of the things inside me that I hold in every day exploded out of me, and I had had enough. I felt like someone stole my peace and then stole my food. By the time I ran off, my steam came back down from boiling, and I felt better, so I just wanted to go home with this person that I like. We can't be respectful and understanding about mental disorders instead of just shitting on mean people, dodging bullets, and claiming narcissism with little to no understanding of the DSM. There is a fine line between being respectful and understanding, and allowing oneself to be on the receiving end of unmanaged issues. The diagnoses and explanations only go so far and are useful as a tool to understand a starting point for the person with those issues to learn healthier coping mechanisms. But they aren't an excuse for assholery. Regardless of the reason behind the action itself was mean, and nobody needs to subject themselves to that. This girl I had a crush on early on in high school told me that she recently broke up with her last BF because his dad passed away suddenly, and as she put it, wouldn't stop being depressed and a fucking crybaby about it. I didn't talk to her much again after she said that. This post made me remember a really hurtful one. When I was 17 at my first year at uni and made friends with the girl in my year. It wasn't like instant crush, but she was funny, and I grew to like her. Day, we were going home after classes together. Turns out, we lived pretty close to each other, chatting and joking, and at one moment she says, "I really like talking to you, just about anything. I would have jumped you right now if you weren't so ugly." I was a really awkward teenager, severely underweight, skin problems, and some other complexes. On top of that, very introverted, so it outright killed my remain self-esteem. Thing is that she actually didn't realize the effect of her words. It was like a passing comment to her and wasn't said with malicious intent. That fact actually made these words even more hurtful. I had something similar happen. There was this girl that was part of our friend group. I talked a lot with her and enjoyed spending time just chatting. Eventually, I started to develop some feelings and decided to bottle them up because it wasn't worth the drama. She must have noticed them because a few days later she rejected me even though I didn't say anything. After the group started to drift apart, she mentioned to some of my friends that she would have dated any of us, except me. Like, what the faff? There was no need for that. I once spent 3 hours hitting on a girl. She seemed pretty into me, and I thought the evening was going pretty great when suddenly she drops this on me. "Do you have a friend who's just like you, only not, gay?" I know some people are oblivious to flirting, but GFC, how oblivious do you have to be to think that? It was a sore spot with me for a long time afterwards. I'd constantly worry if I was coming off as gay when I tried to talk to girls, and sadly reinforced by gay men hitting on me on occasion, and then being confused when I turned them down. On behalf of humanity, and specifically women, I am so sorry. This broke my heart. Whatever physical features you had then that weren't up to her standard of beauty, that has got to one of the most thoughtlessly ugliest things I've ever heard someone say. I hope you're thriving and know your worth now, King. She a very sarcastic person? You said you guys were walking, joking, chatting around. Could it be a possibility she was in fact joking, being sarcastic? Like maybe she was actually hinting that she did like you were attracted to you. Because my wife is extremely sarcastic and she jokes like that sometimes. And at first, my autistic self who struggles with sarcasm sometimes didn't get it. Anyway, if she wasn't sarcastic joking, that is a terrible thing to say. Screw her. Wouldn't you notice if your drink was suddenly way stronger? This seems so dumb. Also, looking at the comments, I have to ask, is this a common thing? I had never heard of it, and I used to party quite a bit. I'm a guy, by the way, if that matters. You often don't notice it. Mixed drinks, especially those with syrups and thick ingredients, are good to hide the alcohol taste. You may notice some difference in strength, but you think it's because your drink is layered, and you hit a more alcoholic part. Spiking a drink with more alcohol is scarily common. It doesn't leave evidence. You can't prove that you only drank 2 cocktails and you didn't want to ingest that much alcohol. Everybody thinks it's your fault that you can't handle drinking. Aside from the fact I saw him do it, I had invited him over and left my drink unattended to go use the bathroom. I had known him for like 4 years at that point, so I guess I never expected him to do something like that. Even had another friend over at the time, who didn't see it happen since he wasn't in the kitchen, but I'm surprised he'd try that stunt with other people around. I did taste it, and yes, it was a bit stronger. What's funny was, as somebody who didn't drink himself, he didn't really know how alcohol worked even at age 25, or whatever he was at that time, so I bet he thought he added a ton. But it was a lowball glass and mostly full of mixer already, so I bet he really only added like an extra shot at most. I still drank it because I knew my tolerance. He kept asking me throughout the night if I was drunk, and I told him no. He seemed so disappointed, that idiot. Good vodka can be masked well if you're not familiar. I quit drinking years ago, and I can taste what seems like a micron of alcohol in a drink now. It doesn't matter what type, brand, or flavor until it's in there. But if the drink is alcoholic, and maybe even a mixed drink that could just be made strongly, you could totally throw a shot in there, especially if it's a vodka-based drink. It's why I measure out fairly carefully when making drinks. I've made some by eye that definitely ended up being like double the amount, and I didn't realize because the mixed part was just strong. She mentioned her last name. I recognized it. Haha, it's probably a good thing. Found out her grandmother was my grandfather's older sister. It worked out okay. We were on a double date sorta deal with her friend and my friend. We found that out pretty early in the night. We literally laughed our asses off for 15 minutes making incest jokes and traded dates. I ended up dating her friend for about 4 years. My friend and her ex found out that they were fifth cousins a few months into the relationship. They're both related to a Southern Civil War general, General Armistead, and they both use that as a fun fact. So when one of them brought it up, it got a tad awkward. But then they figured that being fifth cousins was enough distance. Broke up for other reasons eventually. A girl in my high school class started acting friendly with me to hit on my cousin. He was as socially awkward as me. We almost always talked about video games, but we didn't have that kind of relationship in which you talk about feelings. My best attempt to help her was telling him, "Hey, Eliza has a crush on you." She dumped me as a friend when he accepted a first date. He never accepted a second date, so I immediately had a friend again. Nope. I specifically couldn't date locally when I was single. I am related to everyone in my home community. One night I was working as a bartender in a small dive. A group of 10 walks in, and I recognize them as locals and start getting some water up for them. It was only my 3rd day at this bar, but I know most of the locals and most of the people in this group. But not one of the girls. She sees me watching her, and she comes up and starts to chat. She invites me to a swingers party. I tell her no, as I am married, but thanks for the invite. Fast forward a few years, and now our kids, mine and the woman from the bar, are in class together, and they end up at our house for a birthday party. As the night is winding down, I sit down next to the woman and start rubbing her about that one night at the bar. My wife is there and is friends with her now because of the kids and knows the story, laughs all around. Then the woman starts telling a story about my cousin. I was like, "How you know Ricky?" She is my cousin Rick's cousin also. Obviously not a super incesty story, but once we figured it out, I looked at my wife and gave an "told you so" look. I guess it depends on the era and the region. I'm not from USA, but my parents have a great-grandfather in common. They came from the countryside, and it was common to keep relationship with just a small number of families with far nearby. Also, my aunt, my father's older sister, married with my great-uncle, my mother's uncle. Currently, I would find it weird to do the same, but I guess at that time it was okay. Also, remember my father telling me that my mother's younger sister was his girlfriend before he married with my mother. Likewise, my mother kinda had my uncle, my father's older brother, as boyfriend, but in this case, it seems like their parents were trying to arrange a marriage. We talked about exes. She mentioned how she should have cheated on him because he was boring to be with. Yeah, I'm out. had a similar issue where a friend said she should have cheated on her boyfriend since he was so boring, and then complained that he liked a bunch of nerdy things like D&D, fantasy novels, and Star Wars. When she realized that those were all things I liked, she kept trying to insist that I was somehow different from him. I didn't see how, since he was also more popular and better looking than me. Pretty much ended our friendship too. Saying someone deserves to be cheated on because of their interests is not remotely the same. They didn't say it was remotely the same, they just said friends don't have to respect your hobbies, which the above person was talking about. I'm into stupid sh*t that my friends think is stupid. Likewise, my friends are into other stupid sh*t that I think is stupid. Saying you should cheat on someone for anything is obviously a huge red flag, exit the friendship now type deal, at least to me. But the context about interests is irrelevant to me. They could have said any other reason for it, and I'd still probably have the exact same response. Do you look down on your friends for enjoying the things they do? Genuinely? Or are you just teasing them? If you think lesser of your friend, that you're somehow superior to them for not liking the thing they do, then you should reevaluate your relationship and yourself. But I assume that you're just poking fun as friends do. I don't see how superiority can enter into the realm of hobbies. I definitely can't be bothered to suffer through the anime some of them recommend. I'm definitely going to make fun of the Magic the Gathering stuff too. They also only passingly like stand up, but my life damn near revolves around it. We'll faff with each other, and when one of the slams or burns actually hits close to home and brings a bit of offense, we feel impressed with the other that they were able to do it. Toughening each other up, if you will. Back in high school, this guy and I had a mutual crush on each other. One day during lunch, we went to a local park with a group of friends. I was wearing the school uniform kilt and was sitting talking with a friend when I felt something poke me in the thigh and then laughing. He and his friends were poking me to watch the fat jiggle while they died laughing. Was instantly disgusted by him, and I don't remember his name or face to this day. He wanted to touch you. The talking point was for you and his friends, but for different reasons. I am highlighting the strong biological draw. He had to touch you. Maybe you understand that already. He was a dirtbag for hiding it behind body criticism for his buds. But what I am highlighting is a very strong biological impulse on the teenage boy's part. It doesn't excuse it, but just what I wish to point out. I see meaning in the idea he had to justify his hands on you somehow ad hoc, instead of scheming to say something to touch you disrespectfully in front of his friends, and then doing it, although it's the same from your perspective. I figured out he was dating me and two other girls and playing each other against us. One night at a party, one of the other girls wanted to fight. Honestly, I was drunk and tired and was getting in my friend's car to leave when she tried to start a fight with me over him. I just said, "Tell your friends we got in a fight and you won. Also, you can have him." I got in the car and went home to bed. That was the day. Decided I would never fight over a guy. If he wants to be with me, he will be with me.